Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. And in this video, what I want to do is talk about the window object in the browser. Like, essentially, when you're working in the front-end DOM. So let's say here, let me just create like an index.html file. Okay, so I just create your basic HTML file. And then I'm going to create a script tag to write some JavaScript. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to console log two objects. I'm going to actually do a console.dir. There is the window object, and there is the document object. Okay, these are two objects that are built into the browser. So they don't exist in things like Node, Deno, because that code is not running in the browser window. The idea is that, hey, your code, your JavaScript is running in the browser, so it has access to information that the browser has. That comes in sort of two flavors. Okay, so if I run this, I'm going to go open this up with Live Server. It opens up browser. I'll open up the console. Okay, and I go to the console. And you see there's a window object. The window object represents the browser window. So it's going to give you all sorts of information for where the browser is at in life. Now that browser, let me just take off mobile mode here, is rendering a document. So what you see here is the current document that you're viewing with the browser, and that's the document object. And that's generally represents what they refer to as the DOM. So essentially all that HTML you write, that's all going to be part of the document. Okay. So I see like here's the body tag, and then inside the body tag, I can kind of go down through the whole visual in this part of the window. But what if I wanted, like, there's other things other than what's visually seen in the document that I care about. So that's what the window object is for. So a lot of the built-in functions that are specifically built into the browser are pretty much everything is part of the window, even the document. So if I scroll down here, like, see, there's the document. Okay, the document is part of the window. Okay, so because the window is essentially the global context in the browser, I don't necessarily need to write the word window to use things like alert or the document. Okay, because generally if I don't specify some sort of parent object, like something dot something, it's always going to assume that I'm referring to the window object. So everything is part of the window object. Okay, so you can see here like the fetch function is part of the window object, the alert function is part of the window object. I'm just trying to find other really kind of good properties to kind of like the cookie store if you're talking about like playing with cookies. The document, we're going to talk about the DOM fetch for like calling APIs. Get computed style, that has to do with like CSS. IndexedDB, which is another way of storing data in the browser, is literally like a document database built into the browser. There's local storage, which is like a key store database built into the browser. And one thing I'd like to focus on here is the location. Okay, the location is literally the URL the browser is currently on. Okay, so you see here in this location object, okay, I can see here that there's like the host, there's and then here we like see the href. So that's all fun and good. So one thing I'd like to focus on is like let's say I have a query string at the end of the URL. So let's say at the end of the URL we put like cheese equals Gouda. Okay, now if I take a look at the window again and I take a look at the location object, location here, okay, I can see that, hey, the href has the whole, like, it has this like whole string. Now what if I just really want to go grab this key value here? Is there really a good way to do that? Like here's like the search string, so you can see here like there's also a property called just the search string, but that's still just giving me this whole thing as a string. Okay, if I want to get like cheese equals Gouda, what you would do, okay, is I would have to create a new URL object. So I'll just create a variable called URL. That's going to equal a new URL, and then we pass the URL, which would be window.location.href. Okay. So now we've created this new URL object. So I can console.log URL. So you can see what we got there, and see here's the URL object, and you can see it like it's all sort of broken up. Now, most important thing here is that you see there's a search params property here. That is the object that we're going to use to actually like go get cheese. So now what I can do is I can do like, if I do this, console.log URL.searchParams.get, and then I say, hey, get me cheese. Okay. And see, now I got the value of cheese. Okay, so if you ever need like the query string in the browser, so like let's say you're handling a URL that has a query string at the end, that's how you would get access to it. You don't need any special libraries or anything like that. You just use the URL object that's built into the browser API, and I think it's available in Node. Like, let me try that out. So let's create a different, like a scratch.js, and let's see here. If I say const URL equals new URL, and the new URL object is http:/www.xyz.com slash cheese equals Gouda. So we have the search string there at the end. And then I were to say console.log url.searchparams.get slash cheese. Let's see if that works. Okay. So then I would say, hey, http node scratch.js. Yep, and that works. So this whole URL object is actually something that exists in the browser, JavaScript, and in Node. It's part of the JavaScript spec then. Okay, but that's generally how you can get URL queries whenever you have a URL. If I can have the URL, I can always create a new URL project and go get those queries that way. So you don't have to worry about that specific framework or library having a way to get it. There's a built-in way to do that in JavaScript. Now, going back to the window object, let's show you some other things. Now again, if I wanted to save data, I have two options, IndexedDB. IndexedDB is a little bit more complicated because it's basically the difference between using IndexedDB and local storage is that local storage is synchronous. So whenever I like add save data in local storage or get data, it pauses everything. Like everything has to finish. Like local storage does its thing in the same sort of queue as everything else. Okay, so the good thing about that is a lot easier to use. Like it's basically using local storage as simple as just me saying, hey, I want to go store some data in there, and I can just sit there and say, I go over here, and I'll just say, hey, like local storage dot get set item, and I want to set a key called cheese, and I want to set the value of cheese to Gouda. Okay, and then if I want to go get that item, I can be like console.log local storage dot get item cheese. Okay, now watch what happens here and see that that works. And if I go over here to application, I can head over to local storage and I can see, look, there cheese has been stored. Okay. Now IndexedDB is a little bit more complicated. I will do a separate video on that just because there's like a lot of steps on how you have to set up IndexedDB. Basically, what you do is you create like a new IndexedDB object, then you have to like create a schema with a version number, and then all this is asynchronous, so you constantly have to be working off promises. It's a little bit trickier to use, but the benefit is you do have like it's asynchronous, so in that case it doesn't have to pause the rest of your application. So if you're working with lots of data and really big chunks of data, and you don't necessarily want to slow down the rest of your application, IndexedDB gives you sort of a nice option of way of storing data in the browser. And again, would you use it as your main database? Depends on what your application is doing, because again, when you're using browser storage, that user has their information on their computer. So if you have like a social app where different users are sharing information with each other, it makes it kind of difficult if the data is on each user's computer. Although I do think there's a database structure that's, I think it's called what, GunDB, that is there to help with that. So right here, basically this I think uses IndexedDB and local storage under the hood, but then also has like a whole bunch of stuff to help coordinate it, so that way like users can send information to each other through WebRTC. So that way you could have like a decentralized social network where you don't necessarily need a central database. So that's called GunDB if that's something you ever want to play with. Okay, cool. Let me go back to the window object here. See if there's anything else I'd really like to point out. And again, the window itself can have a bunch of, just like anything else, can have events. So you have click events, which means if, hey, if you have a click event on the window object, it means if you literally click anywhere, you trigger the event. Which can have there's reasons you'd want to do that. Let's see here. There's the origin, which is just the base URL. Let's see here. Any other really good, useful stuff? I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. You could pretty much spend the rest of your life studying the window object, and all the things you can do with it. Okay, so like this like style media just tells you sort of like what right now we're currently on a screen. Like data about like hey where on the screen you're located if you were like building a game and you want to make sure that people have to click on like the exact right spot. So here's like location of like information, resize, all sorts of functions for like adjusting the window, closing the window. So like resize by, resize to, lots and lots and lots and lots of functions. Print function to queue up the print box. Prompt if you want to put like little pop up and get information from the user. Not sure what post message does, but you get the point. Like here's like the height and width of the screen. A lot of information you can use in your application to do all sorts of really fun, interesting things. But one of the things you have to realize, again, the idea is that the window is like the browser. So if you're using Chrome, if you're using Opera, you're using Firefox, whenever you have the window object, it represents that browser window. So what you're interacting with is like literally the software itself. So that's why it has so much power. And generally, like if you're trying to do something that's beyond just like, hey, the website you're displaying, which would be the document, this is where you're going to find those things. Okay, so have a great day and enjoy. My name is Alex Merced. Have a great day and enjoy.